Esther 9 and verse 20, where we left off last week. We'll finish 20 to the end of the chapter, finish chapter 10, which was only 3 verses, and we will be done. When I first started looking at this, thinking, okay, now, I almost had a little panic attack last week, because you know how we expedited this, and we were going to go on into April, and then it came down to we're not going to have a lot of Sunday night time in April, and I'm not going to be in town next week. So I said, okay, we've got to get it done by the 19th. Then oh my goodness, I panicked, because how are we ever going to do this? Had a workable plan. And then I start looking this week at what is left. I thought, oh my goodness, I don't have enough for a whole lesson until I started studying. And I always have plenty for a lesson. Fret not. I got all kinds of things to share with you, and I'm excited to do it, as I am every single week. Some of it seemed like a lot of repetition, didn't it? It just seemed like a lot of repeat stuff. So when I read that, I thought, that's why I'm thinking, what are we going to talk about? We've already talked about all this stuff before. But there's some nuances to it and some reasons that it's repeated. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Understand why it's there, because if it's there, we know it's there for a very good reason. So let's look in verse 20 of chapter 9. When we ended last time, it seemed a little, pedantic, that it was so specific. Oh, okay, the provinces outside the walled city, they're going to celebrate on the 13th, or they're going to fight on the 13th, celebrate on the 14th, and the ones in the walled city, they fought on the 13th and 14th, so they celebrated on the 15th. And then it seemed like we start reading our lesson for tonight, and there's a lot of repeat. But the reason there's repeat is because there was confusion. And you know as well as I know, when there's confusion, you sometimes have to repeat yourself multiple times. And that's where we find ourselves in chapter 9. We have Mordecai and we have Esther trying to clear up some misunderstandings. So let's look at verse 20. It says, and Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them. Remember that word, obliging. You'll see it, or a form of it, a couple more times. Obliging them to keep the 14th day of the month of Adar, and also the 15th day of the same, year by year. When I said that word obliging, I said pay attention to that, because that means to set or to make binding. If somebody's obliged to do something, they are bound to do that. And this is more of a legal terminology here in this verse and in the other verses. So it's not just you're obliged to do this, but if you don't, it's kind of okay. It's you're obliged to do this. And he was setting down the law. In fact, there's one word, I can't remember where, I'll say it in my notes in just a little bit, but there's something that is written that is the same, the phrase interpreted is the same word as edict that we have seen in prior chapters. Although we're not told that it's a law of the Medes and Persians thing, like, it can't ever be revoked or anything, because this is a Jewish thing. It's not a national law. It's something he's setting as a religious thing. So it's not a Medes and Persian thing, but it's a very serious thing. That's what we need to get. So he obliged them, or he set this to keep or to celebrate the 14th and 15th days. Now this went out all the way to all the provinces that we're told. Well, I imagine when these provinces, hundreds, maybe thousands of miles from the capital city, get this letter that says, oh, you're supposed to be celebrating on the 14th and 15th. And they're like, well, who added the 15th onto this? Remember, there wasn't the news. There wasn't the internet. There are people maybe thousands of miles away from the capital city that never knew that there were 2 days of battle in the capital city. All they knew is they got one edict that says you're going to die on this day. They get another edict or letter that says you can fight back on this day. And then they're celebrating on the day after. And then now they're confused as to why the 15th is now added to the mix. So that's why we're having letters. And that's why we're having confusion requiring those letters. But let's keep going. Verse 22. They're going to keep the same year by year as the days on which the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday. that they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days for sending gifts of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So here's Mordecai's letter's contents. It says, here's what you're going to do. We're going to clarify this. On the 14th and on the 15th, here's what your celebration should contain. So this just summarizes that verse that I just read. He says you're supposed to remember the details. And we'll see when we get down to verse 24, kind of recaps the whole story of Esther. Did you catch that? There's a summary of the whole story. We'll get there in a minute. But on these days of celebration, they are supposed to remember the details. And then after they remember these details, we're supposed to also have some feasting and some gladness. And, I stopped at those first two, and I remember just kind of being struck by this thought. We kind of parallel that with what we do here in our church. There is a New Testament obligation, for lack of a better word, but it's kind of a good word, that we have, in which we are told to remember something before we are to take and eat. Right? And so I thought, what a great parallel to, 2 Corinthians chapter 11, where we find the Lord's table. Here we are, and I'm struck whenever we have the Lord's table is the fact that I'm having to have this because I am so prone to forget. God gave us that ordinance because He knew we would forget. And He wanted us to keep, as a church, doing that because we are very forgetful people. And we have this in order to make us remember why we're here in the first place. And that's exactly what this celebration that Mordecai, which he hasn't yet given a name, but this is what he's telling him. You got to remember, because you're going to be very prone to forget, and you don't ever need to forget what God just saved our people from. And then in doing that, then of course when we're very happy people, I don't know about you, but very happy people in my house like to eat. And so of course we're going to have feasting and gladness.
Happy or not,
I know some people, when they're not happy, maybe eat more than when they're happy. But anyway, then as we read through, we see that they're supposed to send food gifts to each other. We talked some about that last week, how that's a reciprocal thing. And then gifts to the poor. These are listed separately because you cannot put them together because of that reciprocal stuff. Because if I'm told, okay, you need to give food gifts to each other and give them to the poor, and give food gifts to the poor and make that reciprocal, how could the poor give back? So that's why I think it's listed separately, because the grammar allows for that as well. They're sending food gifts to each other. I need to send, I need to receive. And we talked about that last week. But then the gifts to the poor, that word gifts, even though gifts appears twice, it's a different word. And that's not specifically food. The food gifts, that's food. The gifts to the poor could be food, could be money, could be clothing. It's the idea of giving a necessity, not just food. And it also has the idea of above and beyond as you are able. So my understanding is this sending food gifts to each other is a practice that you are supposed to do when you are participating in Purim. The gifts to the poor is optional based on your own ability to do that. And from this, we get our idea of tithes and offerings. Because this is your tithe, and this is your offering, above as you are able to add to your tithe. See? I think it's kind of cool how we can tie this together with the practices that you and I would, understand better from, just what we do. And I read something from Matthew Henry in his commentary. It said, thanksgiving and almsgiving should always go together. If you are truly thankful and you give thanks, you will give more than thanks. And I thought that was kind of a neat little statement. But let's keep going. In verse 23, it's warm in here. Usually everybody's freezing, so we'll have that problem tonight, do we? All right, so verse 23. So the Jews accepted what they had started to do. What was that? What had they started to do? One day of celebration, correct? And then what Mordecai had written to them, which was what? Add the second day. So that's basically just a little explanatory verse of what happened when they got their letter. Now, I want to bring up this point, but I am not convinced that this is truly the case, but I did read this, so I just wanted to share it with you. That, where it says what they had started to do, or, where am I? Or what they had begun, is how it is in King James. That could also mean to be polluted or to be defiled. So you could read that in kind of a little bit of a negative mindset to say, okay, they continued doing what they had done, which they may have been doing something not right as far as their celebration goes, and they continued doing whatever it was that was not right, and then added these things that Mordecai said to add to it. So they still kind of had a polluted Purim, for lack of a better way to put it, and then they say that's why that second letter from Esther had to come to clean up that mess. Maybe, but it's a little nuance on that word, and I just wanted to throw that out to you. That could be nothing. But let's keep going, because it's going to get fun. Verse 24. For Haman the Agagite, the son of Mattatha, the enemy of the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is, lots, to crush and to destroy them. And when it came before the king, he gave orders in writing that his evil plan that he had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore, they called these days Purim, after the term pur. Stop there. We'll read the second part of that verse in just a few minutes. This is I could not figure out grammatically why it's not ever called Purim till right now, because or why the lots are not called Purim. If you look, it says they cast, how is it worded? They cast pur, where am I? Yes, Therefore they called these days Purim after the term pur. Yeah, but I was going up. Let's go up to, you said 24, thank you. Had cast pur, that is cast lots. That's the same way it's worded, way back in chapter 3 or whenever Haman did that the first time. Why does it say that they cast pur and then that is they cast lots? When, and this is very small Hebrew grammar lesson because this is all I know, but adding an im to a word in Hebrew makes it plural, or at least sometimes. Like we add an s, okay? So I have a shoe, and if I have two, I have shoes, okay? I have a boat, I have two, I have boats. So we're accustomed to making a plural that way. They would make their plural by adding an im. You know, you've heard this before, because if I have a cherub, and I have more than one cherub, I have cherubim, right? Or seraphim. You've heard these words before. The im makes them plural. So I don't know why up here in verse 24 and then way back in chapter 3 it says they cast pur, the lot, but then in parentheses we're told they cast lots. Because to me it would be easier to say they cast Purim because of two lots. So I don't know. There's got to be some great theological reason, and some Hebrew scholar out there would probably mock me for my lack of knowledge on that. But all that to say, the feast is called Purim, and Purim simply means lots. It's a plural of the lot that they cast, or that Haman cast, that started this whole thing. That's how Purim got its name. Now, did I put that slide up here? No, I think I... Oh, no, I did. All right. The dates of Purim change every year. Now, in the Jewish calendar, it will always be on Adar, the 14th and 15th, what we just talked about. But on our calendar, that would change. So we missed it. Sorry. We could have had this lesson last Sunday, and we would have been having it, just right on the date of Purim. But just to give you an idea, this is how it changes. So it's not like Christmas, which is going to be on the same date every year and just change the day of the week. This in our calendar would change. If we were Jewish, we'd have to keep track of that and know what we're going to, what days we need to take off work so we could celebrate. So I have a handout for you. And now don't go sitting there reading it and ignoring, because we're going to look at a few things together. I'll tell you what, here. Come on, let me take care of the back table for me. Thank you. Okay, now I gotta find my copy. I actually wanted to read up on Purim. I had read a lot before. Of course, I forget a lot because I'm old. So when I pulled it up this week, that's when I found out that we missed it, that it was last Sunday, last weekend. But in the course of doing that, I found this great Jewish website, and it was Purim 2017. So this was your How to Purim guide 2017 if you were Jewish and maybe you were a new Jew and you just weren't quite sure how to go about this. So I'm not going to read this. I want to just kind of tiptoe through it and show you a few things. I got some slides interspersed too. So when the saints go marching in, yes. I know. I love that. Whenever I hear that, though, I just want to break into song. All right. Number 1 says, here's how we celebrate Purim. We're going to hear the Megillah. I actually looked it up to see if that was pronounced that way, and that's how I heard it. The Megillah is the book of Esther. And so during Purim, the book of Esther is actually read completely through 2 times at 2 different services. Now this is where it gets kind of fun, because it says, if you keep going down a couple of lines, it says this year, that's Saturday night, March 11, and Sunday, March 12. Pay attention. You need to hear every single word. And you have to hear every single word when they read the book of Esther, because there are some things, it's an interactive reading kind of thing. This is what I absolutely love. It says, whenever it's being read and Haman's name is spoken, the name to them is so evil that they have to drown out that name. Like this, so if I'm saying, start talking and I say the word Haman, there's supposed to be a lot of noise going on and people, isn't that annoying? This compliments of the elementary school music teacher in the room. I asked her if she had a ratchet thing for her percussion section. She actually had a ratchet thing. So this somehow or another is considered music.
I got 3 of them.
I know, she gets it. You know? And her class maybe will use this in one class, and then she has a class come in that does recorders. I mean, this girl is going to be deaf by the time she's 30. Anyway, but you got the idea. That makes awful, awful, awful racket.
What does that word mean, Shabbat, or whatever that is? You fixing to tell them?
Where am I? No, but I read that a lot. Chabad custom. I don't know if that's like the name of the service that they go to, or I don't know. I did see that a lot, but I didn't look that one up. I looked a lot up. You would pick the word out that I didn't.
I mean, I have no clue what that is.
Okay, but you know what? We can all look it up later and see. Or here comes Katie Baker with the phone.
Who's got it?
And, Google time for Katie Baker now. You just keep looking. I'm going to keep going. All right, here's you a grogger. This is something when I looked at, and you can see it's very similar to what I just did. That's why I knew it'd have to be kind of like the same noise, because you see the little wheel and the wooden reed, and it goes, but they would do this, and that thing flies around and makes this noise. So can you imagine? So come on, kiddies. We're going to the synagogue. It's time to hear the Megillah. And, these kids are going to be excited because you never get to make noise in church, But on Purim, when you go and you hear this being read and the name Haman is said, you get to do that. You get to stomp. People would boo. You get to make any kind of racket that you want to make. But it'd have to be pretty fast because whoever's kind of, the rabbi, I'm sure, is singing this the way that they do. Oh, and just so I knew you'd be interested, I looked it up. You can buy one on Amazon. And it's only 27 cents with $4.99 shipping. So that looks like a little metal one. But apparently it's an official, Purim grogger. But has 18 customer reviews with only 3 stars. So I didn't read the reviews. I'm not sure.
Grandma gift.
That
doesn't live at your house.
Isn't it though? Isn't it? But isn't that great? And so speaking of Haman, the other interesting thing, and this isn't on your paper. See, a good teacher won't give you everything, so you have to listen to get some of the rest, right? So one thing that I read about Haman is that when they get to the part in, what was it, last week that we did that, or chapter 8 maybe, when his sons were listed? Remember that? Okay? When they read the Megillah, they read all the 10 names in one breath. Because, I guess, I have to get over faster. I don't know. Remember this?
Shandatha and Dalphon and Aspatha and Poratha and Adelia and Eradatha and Parmashta and Arasai and Aradai and Vaizatha.
Not one breath. So they would read them in one breath. There's also, I'm told, on the scroll that they read from, these are positioned, I don't know if they're positioned all in like a column or whatever, but they're positioned in such a way to remind them that they were hanged. So if they were indeed impaled on that pole or whatever, I don't know how they're positioned on the page, but the names are put in a certain way on a page to remind them that these were hanged along with Haman. Kind of interesting, isn't it? So let's keep going. Oh, I love the end of that first paragraph where it says, if you can't make it to the synagogue for the reading, the rabbi will send somebody to read it to you. Isn't that cool? All right, so number 2 says to give to the needy. We did talk some about that, but this is this year's, thing. Don't forget, this is the latest and greatest. So last weekend you were to give money or food to at least 2 needy people. Now this doesn't, to me, look like that above and beyond if you are able kind of thing. I told you that was my understanding of it based on the way the scripture reads, but I don't know, maybe it is a requirement for them now, I don't know. But I love the end of this paragraph where it says, on Purim we give a donation to whoever asks. We don't verify his or her bank balance first. So I'm going to look up those dates for Purim next year. I'm going to find someone that's celebrating Purim, and they don't have to verify whether I need money or not. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that. Anyway, it says, of course, they want to get the children involved, too. I thought was great. All right, then sending food gifts to your friends. Wanted to show you this. I found a picture of a Purim food basket. Let's see. It says you're supposed to give to at least one Jewish acquaintance. Now, this is Jew to Jew. This is, you want Francis to do this? Yeah, that would be a big cinnamon roll right there. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about that. You see this little thing right here? That is called a hamantash. That's like the official food of Purim. And it is an incredibly interesting little cookie or whatever, pastry, whatever. Now, a few years ago when I taught Esther, I tried to make hamantash. And it didn't turn out so great. It was a great effort. So you all can be very thankful that I had a really busy week. I didn't even have a chance to attempt a hamantash. But you can actually go on All Recipes, or you can Google it, and All Recipes, or I don't know, Betty Crocker. Everybody has hamantash recipes. So you can make a hamantash cookie at home if you so desire. But let's talk about the hamantash. I did not draw that, just so you know. If I had tried, it would look like that. But I didn't draw that. But a hamantash or hamantash can be referred to as one of these 3 things. Haman's hat, Haman's pocket, or Haman's ear. Yeah, lovely. And that's why the picture, it's most commonly referred to as his hat, because Jewish legend was that Haman wore a 3-pointed, 3-cornered hat. I kind of want to start singing, my hat, it has 3 corners. Yes, thank you, Angie. I was afraid I was the only one that would know that song. Anyway, I don't know how they came up with that. I read, in this Jewish legend, there's a certain meaning for each point. I thought, I'm not going to belabor that because we could be here way too late. But anyway, somebody has said too that it could, maybe it started being called that because of the phrase, if such and such happens, I'll eat my hat. You've ever heard that? I have no idea what the story is behind that phrase and where, why we say that. And I'm sure we can find that out. But anyway, the ones who hold to that interpretation as to why, this is Haman's hat, is that he was so sure that the Jews were going to die that he would have eaten his hat if it hadn't happened. And obviously, he didn't eat his hat. He had a worse fate. But, Katie, what was it you were looking at? Chabad.
So it's apparently like a movement within the Jewish, so it's like a subsection of the Jewish religion.
Okay, so where did we?
So
Chabad.
So,
okay,
like,
so
and
it's
a Chabad rabbi. So that's
okay.
not like a normal rabbi.
Got it. So it's a subset of.
It's an Orthodox
Jewish practice.
Hasidic movement.
So they do it a little bit differently. So that's why it's called Shabbat. There we go. Thank you so much, and thank you, Google. Anyway, I just remembered she was looking something up, and I didn't want to overlook. All right, Haman's pocket. It's also referred to as that because apparently in Yiddish, which I do not speak, Haman and poppy seed sound very similar, whatever the words. So this originally would have poppy seeds in it, and so it looked like a poppy seed pocket. So then it's called Haman's pocket. That was one of those reasons. And then the other thing was Haman's ear, because there's a legend that says before he was hanged on his own gallows, he cut his ears off. And so then I guess you celebrate the fact he was hanged on Purim by eating his ears. Lovely, isn't it? Save that one for last for you. So let's see, was there anything else about Hamantash I wanted to tell you except that they're really, really hard to make? Oh, no, this was really neat. And I found, as I studied through this, I mean, there are some things that are kind of odd to us, but everything has a specific reason that it is done or whatever. It's like, okay, who came up with this, whether it's hat, pocket, or ear? And what was really neat to me is that when you make this, and this is probably where I failed in my culinary attempts, because the jelly did not stay where it was supposed to stay, and they never looked triangular to speak of. Anyway, when you bake these, apparently the jelly, which is now they use figs or prunes, not poppy seeds, but the jelly when you make this is kind of hidden, and then as the thing bakes, it separates, and you can see that, and it's supposed to symbolize the fact that they were in hiding, and then they were able to come out of hiding because they were free, for lack of a better word, but they really weren't, but yeah. Isn't that cool, just the symbolism of a cookie? And so that's why when I showed you that basket of a Purim, food basket that you give to your friends, that would be in it, because that's very symbolic, and that kind of tells their story of, the book of Esther, the Megillah. All right. Now, number 4, the feast. So it says, during the course of Purim on March 12, gather your family and maybe a guest or two and have a very festive meal. I don't really know what they eat at this Purim, and maybe it just depends on your family. It says the table should be festively bedecked with a nice tablecloth and candles. And just have a great old time together. So then I found a picture of a Purim feast in Jerusalem from, I think it was like 2011. And they had a great time, as you can tell. Yeah. But anyway, there. Do what?
What happens in Jerusalem?
Yes, what happens in Jerusalem stays in Jerusalem. So yeah, I guess that feasting and gladness gets taken to a whole new level. Just wait, I'm not done with slides. We're gonna have some more
These
fun.
must have been the Chabad people though, because those guys are Hasidic, aren't they, with those hats?
So they look good. Unless there's more factions too than just that. I don't know. Flip the paper over. So it says special prayers. I didn't read a whole lot about special prayers, but I did read right 3 lines up from the bottom of that paragraph where it says, in the morning service there's a special Torah reading from Exodus describing the battle that Joshua waged against Amalek. So they go all the way back. Isn't that neat that we went all the way back in our study? So when we read all of this about Purim, we've already studied that, and it makes a lot of sense to us. And then masquerade, I love this, because it says the children, but adults do this too, can dress in costumes, which is an allusion to God's hand, which, by the way, they don't write out the word God. If you haven't noticed, that's not a typo. They acknowledge or allusion to God's hand in the Purim miracle, which was disguised by natural events. And also, I read that they like to dress up in costume because they were in hiding, and then they can take off the costume and be themselves too. So, again, in Jerusalem, you have the Purim parade. I have absolutely no idea why this particular costume, but I loved it. And I thought it was great. The rest of this page, we're not going to bother with right now. You can read it later. It talks about the fast and stuff, too, that precedes Purim. But Jewish people have a lot to celebrate, and they know it, and so they do it. They do it right, don't they? So let's see where I am. We want to pick back up, and what is really good, just so you know, I don't have a slide again for a little while, so you get to enjoy that one. Let's look at verse 26, the latter part of that, because we stopped in the middle of the verse. Therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, and of all that they faced in this matter, and of what had happened to them, the Jews firmly obligated themselves and their offspring, and all who joined them, that without fail they would keep these 2 days, according to what was written and at the time appointed every year. Oh my goodness, that was a mouthful and a lot of those little clauses and phrases packed in there. To just pick it apart, that's where I said, because of all that was written in this letter. Remember I told you I knew that there was something that meant the word edict. That's that right there. All that was written, because of the edict that Mordecai sent to them, they obligated themselves. And let's see. What else do I want to tell you? Oh, where it says they obligated themselves, their offspring, and all who joined them. So basically, Purim celebration is for Jews, the ensuing offspring of those Jews, and for anybody else who signs on as a Jew. So you don't even have to have been Jewish or have a Jewish heritage all the way back to this day and time in order to celebrate. If you were to, sign on as a Jew or convert as a Jew or whatever you do to become a Jew. Let's see. Verse 28 says that these days should be remembered and kept. And I like the word remembered here because we talked about remembered, but it's also not just remembering the day, it's remembering the reason for the day. So that differentiates those who just celebrate Christmas and who celebrate the reason that we have Christmas. See, there's a difference. And that one word means that. I love that. I think that's really, really neat. And the call again to remember, like I said, we're very prone to forget. And then, who should remember? But we're told, every generation and clan or family and province and city. There's no one excluded for who should remember. That was verse 28, but we could start there. And that these days should be remembered and kept through every generation in every clan, province, and city, and that these days of Purim should never fall into disuse. I got hung up on that word, disuse. And then, as I looked it up, I thought, okay, I was thinking misuse. That you should keep Purim pure. You should celebrate it the way it's meant to be celebrated, and if you're not, then you're disusing it. But no, that's misusing Purim. Disuse means not to use at all. So and I know you're sitting there going, duh. I got hung up on that. And I didn't know if anybody else would, so I just wanted to let you, don't get hung up on it. It just simply means you got to do this. You can't just put it aside and not do it. And nor should the commemoration of these days cease from among their descendants. What I found neat is the call that this cannot cease actually means to vanish. this day cannot vanish from your remembrance. And it's not the same word, but it's similar to the fact that the Jews were going to be annihilated. Remember all those words that killed, destroyed, and annihilated that we talked about so many times? It's not the same word, means a lot the same as to be annihilated or to be gone from memory forever and ever. And that was what was supposed to happen to the Jews. And I find it so neat that in the wording of keeping the memory alive of what happened and how you weren't annihilated, you better not let this get annihilated. Once again, I just think it's neat that everything points back to a specific thing. There's symbolism, but as these people are writing letters, they're using a lot of the same words that were used to counter them. They're using them in blessing back. I think that's awesome. So then, everything's looking great. Mordecai has written these letters, or this letter, and here's how you're supposed to do it. Then we come to verse 29, and you start kind of getting a little confused. Because you're thinking, okay, he wrote this letter. How much time has transpired between 28 and 29? I don't know, but some time has transpired. Because in 29, then we're told, then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, gave full written authority, confirming what? This second letter. And if you look back at verse 20, we see that he sent letters to all the Jews. So that would have been his first letter. So then you have to look and go, well, why was there a second letter? Well, then you keep reading, and you see letters were sent to all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, in words of peace and truth. Now, when that jumps off the page, because why were they having to write a letter that involved peace and truth? Because if you're writing a letter trying to invoke peace and to give truth, that kind of leads you to believe there might not have been some peace and there might have been some untruth that they were trying to sort out, right? And that probably was the case. Let's keep reading. Verse 31, that these days of Purim should be observed at their appointed seasons as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther obligated them, saying there's that obligated again, and they had obligated themselves and their offspring with regard to their fast and their lamenting. So let's look at this. In verse 31, Esther confirmed in this letter the appointed or exact days that were obligated by Mordecai and Queen Esther. So if the problem of truth was which day, one day or the other, or both, and up to this point we couldn't think that it could be any clearer, right? But you also have to remember how things lose something. You know, as word spreads, things get muddled. You ever played that telephone game? You know, right? So she is confirming the exact days that this is supposed to happen. She's also confirming that the Jews had obligated themselves and future generations to follow these traditions. Why did that have to be repeated? Well, had they started to drop it? Had enough time passed? I don't think a lot of time had passed, but some time must have passed that this was not being followed. And then she either added or she clarified the purpose of the fasting in the morning in the celebration of Purim. It's the first time that we see that there is fasting in mourning. We know that they're supposed to be feasting and gladness and sending the baskets of goods to each other and giving to the poor and all that. We've seen that 2 times already. We haven't seen fasting and mourning. So is this the purpose of the second letter, to add that in, or is it just to clarify? I don't know, but we do know Esther confirmed it and it was to be done. And then in verse 32, we're told that she confirmed these practices of Purim and it was recorded in writing. We've seen that before too, haven't we? It's recorded in writing. You know those books of the Chronicles? Probably in there too. But then we get to chapter 10. And then you have to look at this, and you know me and my timelines. Well, I couldn't do a timeline right now because I don't know how much time passes between chapter 9 and 10, or between verse 29 and, you know, the rest of chapter 10. I don't know if there's a break there. I don't know if there's 2 breaks. I just don't know. But we do know that chapter 10 seems to be a nice little summary chapter. It's only 3 verses. It's nice and quick, but it says a lot. So we read verse 1, and we see that King Ahasuerus imposed a tax on the land and on the coastlands of the sea. Now that doesn't sound like a very happy way to start, does it? They're getting taxed. Except, if you'll go back, can you turn backwards with me to chapter 2? Chapter 2 seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Oh, goodness. So chapter 2 and verse 18. This is our happy chapter. Remember, I even had a really cool slide when we got to this point, and it played the Hallelujah chorus. You remember that? Anyway, verse 18. Then the king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. Do I know for sure that we're talking about the same tax? No. But he gave them a break on their taxes when Esther became queen. And then we get all the way to chapter 10, and we're told in verse 1 that he imposed a tax on them. It is quite possible, from what I have read, and I thought it's kind of logical, that all of a sudden he's realizing, we need money. It's time to start that thing back up again. How much time has transpired? Well, I don't know. We're gonna look at that in just a second. But some say that Mordecai actually came up with this tax plan because the Jews were working, and were now he maybe felt that they were now needing to contribute themselves as the working class. Maybe they didn't before, maybe they did, but this was just one of those hypotheses that I read, that maybe Mordecai just came up with this tax plan because they were thriving and they needed to contribute to the government as well. But anyway, let's go on to verse 2. And all the acts, now we're talking about Ahasuerus, not Mordecai right now. And all the acts of his power and might, and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of the Medes and Persians? I love this because it's kind of like this big tribute to Ahasuerus. And when you look to see how this was originally written, and you see how it says, the acts of his power and his might, and that full account there means a declaration or an exact statement of the greatness of Mordecai, whereunto the king advanced him, or that means to make great. What am I getting at? It's talking about the advance or the achievements of Ahasuerus, and indirectly saying, hey, one of his achievements is Mordecai. He's taking credit because we know Mordecai was highly respected throughout the whole empire, right? And so Ahasuerus knew that. Guess what Ahasuerus would do? Hey, I'm the one that promoted this guy. You like him so much because I saw a good man. I know a good man when I see him. And we have to remember who had the job before Mordecai, who was handpicked from, Ahasuerus. But they're trying to forget about him, right? So he takes credit for Mordecai, but I'm sure Mordecai was fine with that. He knew how he got there. And then to finish this, the verse 3 of chapter 10, this is, we're going to read this very slowly because this actually has to do with Mordecai, which I find is very interesting, that the book that is entitled Esther ends with a verse about Mordecai. It doesn't end with Esther. And Esther's not in the last chapter. And remember, God was not in any of it, right? Or at least the word God or the name God. But here we have what seems to be in praise of Mordecai at the very end of the book. For Mordecai the Jew was second in rank. Look up at the slide. He was second to, that is his position. We're going to see 5 things about Mordecai as we finish out the verse. Second to in position to the king. What is interesting, if you look up the second to, actually means a double or a copy. So, yes, his position might have been second, but it was almost as if he were equal to the king. He had so much power. Then we read on. He was second in rank to Ahasuerus, and he was great among the Jews. So we have great among the Jews, which is his influence. What I found interesting is the word among, because he wasn't great over the Jews. Well, he was, but it's the fact that the word among is chosen instead of above. And his position and his influence did not ever get to him so that he forgot who he really was. And all through the book, we know he was referred to as Mordecai the Jew. They were still a subclass. They were still the exiles. And he's still associated with them as Mordecai the Jew. Do you know what came to mind? Jesus of Nazareth. You ever studied anything about Nazareth? Do you know in the Gospels we're also told that rhetorical question, does anything good ever come out of Nazareth? Because Nazareth was a not nice place. And no one wanted to be associated with Nazareth except Jesus. You know? So now we have Mordecai the Jew, but we also have Jesus of Nazareth. Think about that. It just came to mind, and I thought, yeah. What a great example that we have in the New Testament and Old Testament of that. Then we read that he was popular with the multitude or majority. Multitude there means majority of his brothers. So this one and the next two, we end the phrase with a group of people. And here we're told with his brothers. This actually means like kinsmen or close relationships. Interesting though, because who knows you absolutely the best are those people that you are closest to. So it emphasizes the fact that he was popular or well-liked among those who knew him the best. And that would be that he had this great reputation with them. But you keep going, and we see that he sought the welfare of his people. So along with reputation, he had character. And sought there is the idea of inquiring from some or to someone for something. And you have to think, okay, if he is second in the land, and he's pretty much equal to the king, to whom is Mordecai seeking help for his people? He can't really go any higher than what he is in the kingdom. He only has one option. God, right? And he gets to the point to be so powerful but never forgets his need of God's help. And inquiring of God for the welfare of his people. And people here is like a broad group, which would be your nation, for his people being the whole empire. So different than brothers in the one before, and now we're on a larger scale. So for this whole empire, he's looking out for them. Every decision he made for their good, not his own. It's the emphasis on the fact that he was not self-seeking. Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I was going to say something else, but we'll move on. Then we have, he spoke peace, and that would be shalom, to all of his people. Here, the people are specifically the Jews. The people in the one above would be the whole empire, which would be Persians and Jews and whoever else was in the empire. But here he's speaking shalom to the Jews. It's the idea of people there is a group of people who have a common base, which would be the Jews, but at one time may have had factions, but are not now factioned. Now, that's neat to me, because way back when we are introduced to Mordecai, we're introduced to him as Mordecai the Jew, but he's also the grandson of, remember I had a slide up there that kind of gave his little lineage? And he was a Benjaminite. Does that word ring a bell? Now, why do we have to be told he's a Benjaminite? We had a lesson way back then, and we talked about the Benjaminites. But that differentiated him as being from one of those 12 tribes. And then somebody else was probably from the tribe of Dan. They lived down the street. And then there's somebody from another tribe, and somebody from another tribe, because the Jews were known, their lineage came from these tribes. When we get to this point, where it's like he spoke peace. It didn't matter which tribe were you from. there was a civil war years ago. Remember, we had a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. There might have been some bad blood still. The Samaritans, we talked about all that. So that didn't matter to him. He spoke peace to them all. Forget the factions. We are one, we are God's people, and we are Jews. He was a unifier. I could have put that there instead of the kindness and fairness. But what a way to end the book by looking at this man whose name means little man, who at the beginning of our book was pretty much nothing, and he worked his way up to be second in the kingdom, and then this is the reputation, this is the man at the end of the book, and this is how he was known throughout the empire. I think that's pretty phenomenal. So let's finish this out and figure out where these people are today. Right? I like things all neatly tied up and wrapped in a package, and the bow's all nice and pretty, and we're just ready to close it down. Well, the poor thing about Mordecai is that we don't know anything about his dates. I couldn't tell you when he was born. I couldn't tell you when he died. I couldn't even tell you how old he was when all of this happened. We've kind of followed Esther through and her age. So we don't know his dates. But we do know that he held this office for 8 years, or at least no more than 8 years. Now, how do we know that? I didn't get my laser pointer out, so I'll just, point. Here we have the Feast of Purim. We know that we're in 474, 473, somewhere in there. That's where our timeline has led us. Our whole year right here of edicts and killings and all of that. That all took place, within that 11-month time frame. So now we're at 474, 473. It's hard to tell because the calendars are wonky, but anyway, we know that Ahasuerus was assassinated in 465. You want to hear a story? There's actually 2 theories as to how this happened. I thought this is kind of interesting because this shows the sovereignty of God. Ahasuerus was killed by a guy named Artabanus. Now, he went about it either one of 2 ways. And I better pay attention because I always get all mixed up. Artabanus, number 1 theory, he went and he killed Ahasuerus. Well, then, let me check. Artabanus was a chief bodyguard. So he was right there. He's the chief bodyguard. Okay, so he had access to the king. It wouldn't have been too hard for him to do it. Crown Prince Darius II should have taken the throne. Now, who is Crown Prince Darius II? The Crown Prince had to be the son of the king and the sitting queen. So therefore, we can deduce that Darius II would have been Esther's son. The second prince was Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes was the son of Vashti and Ahasuerus. And so when Vashti got deposed, Artaxerxes lost his chance for the throne if Ahasuerus had any children with another sitting queen. Make sense? So apparently he must have had Darius with Esther. So the second, the crown prince Darius II, let's see. Artabanus kills the king. He accuses Darius. Artaxerxes finds out that Darius killed the king. So he killed Darius for revenge for killing Ahasuerus. But after he kills Darius, he finds out that that didn't really happen. So then he kills Artabanus, because he lied. And then now by default, he is king. You see? Yeah, did you follow that? All right, so the second theory was Artabanus killed Darius so that he could be second in line, which didn't work. He was wrong because he would not have been. He was only the chief bodyguard. I don't know how he thought he would have been second in line. But he killed Darius. And so then I guess when he realized that this was not a good idea, he got afraid, so he killed the king. So the king couldn't kill him. So then Artaxerxes knew who killed the king, so he killed Artabanus. So either way, Artaxerxes had to end up killing Artabanus, and Artaxerxes ended up being the king. Artaxerxes was not supposed to be the king. And Artaxerxes ended up being the king that ended up having Nehemiah work for him as a cupbearer, and he was the one that ended up letting Nehemiah go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Would Darius have done that? I don't know. If God wanted him to, he would have. But Artaxerxes, the king who wasn't supposed to be king, was king because of God's sovereign plan. So even in the assassination of Ahasuerus, you see the sovereignty of God just continues, and he puts people in positions. It doesn't matter if the birth order's right. You know, I love that. I love that. But back to the Mordecai, and how Mordecai would have become, you know, at the end of all this edicts and killings and promotions, that's when he got his job as prime minister, for lack of a better word. Well, he lost that when Ahasuerus was assassinated, because it's like even with our presidents, when a new person comes in, they can wipe it all out and start over with their own people. So they, what I read says history records a new person with Artaxerxes that has Mordecai's job. So historically, it is confirmed, I guess, that Mordecai did not work in this position under Artaxerxes, that it was over when Ahasuerus was assassinated. Now, where does that leave us with Esther? Well, Esther, when Artaxerxes took over, she was now no longer the queen, obviously. Some say she stayed in the palace, or at least she did have some influence on Artaxerxes, and that could be why he was a Jewish sympathizer and let Nehemiah go back and build the walls. I don't know. But let's just look at her dates, because we know that roughly, these are all roughly, but it's the best I could do. 492, we talked about the fact that when she became queen. In 479, she would have been somewhere between 12 and 14 years old. So that means her time of being queen ended when she was 27 years old. And then she lived for 5 more years, approximately, to be age 32, approximately, when she died. Now, where can you find her? There. Mordecai and Esther are buried in Hamadan, Iran. And when I was reading about this, I knew that Susa was the winter palace of Persian royalty. And we even can read about Susa or Sushan, the palace, in Daniel. So, for the Persians, I guess, how much winter goes on over there, I don't know. I don't know how cold it gets. But anyway, that's their winter residence. They had a summer residence, and it was here, in what we would know as Hamadan, Iran. So the theory, because she supposedly is buried here, is that when Artaxerxes came to the throne, she and Mordecai went and retired at the age of 27. She went and retired at the summer palace. And I don't know if maybe when Artaxerxes, if he ever came to the summer palace, she was either there or they flipped and she went to the winter palace. She just, did the off-season thing, with the palaces. I have no idea. But apparently they died. I don't know how close together they died. I don't know if she outlived him. I have absolutely no idea. But they were buried, and then years and years and years later, this shrine was put on top of their tombs. And then when you go inside, this apparently is what you see. Ask me which was which. I don't know, but if you could read the wall, maybe you could find out. I don't know who. And did they exhume them and bring them up, or is this just for show? I have no idea, but that's what you see when you go walking in that building that I just showed the picture of. Do what?
Somebody lived under there.
Well, why don't you go over there and you can come back and give us a report. And then there's one more thing I just want to tell you about Esther, just to make it a complete package. All right, this is extra. This is bonus material. Okay, and it has to do with what is called additions to Esther. To us, that sounds like heresy, right? We're going to add, additions to this book. It's complete, and yes, I do believe it is. But there are 6 other chapters of the book of Esther. But we don't have them because they were not considered accurate enough to be in the canon of Scripture. But it has quite a history. And here's the history. They were included in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew text. You've heard of that before. And they were interspersed throughout the book, just as if they belonged there. And then you have Jerome, who had his Vulgate, and when that was his Latin translation, and when he translated that, he translated it more from Hebrew than he did from Greek. And he didn't find them in the original Hebrew writings, but since they were in the Septuagint, he added them at the end of the book of Esther as additions to Esther. Then you have, that some translations still include these. but some chose to leave them out because they didn't pass all the tests to be included in the canon of scriptures. And I'm sure there's a whole lot you can read on that. And we weren't going to get tied down with that. I wanted to give you this information so that if you ever hear of this, hey, I've heard of that, don't know much about it, but at least, if you're a phone a friend or something, you could, have that information. But here's kind of interesting. This became an issue during the Reformation, and it has gotten Martin Luther into some trouble. Because, let me read something. I can read it better than I can say it. The canonicity of these Greek editions has been a subject of scholarly disagreement practically since their first appearance in the Septuagint. Martin Luther, being perhaps the most vocal Reformation-era critic of the work, considered even the original Hebrew version to be of doubtful value. So he even questioned what we have as the book of Esther. Luther's complaints against the book carried past the point of scholarly critique and led in part to the complaint of anti-Semitism frequently made against him. His anger at the Jews was not to their race, but to their theology. So Martin Luther had a problem with this book of Esther, but especially with these additional 6 chapters that were in question. And I found it really interesting because Catherine took a mission trip years ago up to New York, and she was working in a church up there. You know where I'm going. She was working in a church up there. I don't know the whole story, and I'm not going to mess it all up. But I know that church in New York City was in a highly populated Jewish area, I suppose, and that church would not sing "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." Had y'all practiced that or something to do? Is that how that came up?
We started the intro to the song in front of everybody.
Oh, yeah. And it became quite an issue with the group that, she was with that were going to perform this song or sing it as a congregation, and they were stopped because this pastor did not want to offend any Jews that may hear it or have come in off the street or whatever, because there still must be an underlying problem between some Jews and Martin Luther over the book of Esther. You see, so the next time you sing "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God," you can think of that. And then the last thing is, me, I'm always going, well, what do those 6 chapters say? Well, I found out that it includes a dream that Mordecai had that was foreshadowing the king's assassination, and I'm assuming that's the assassination attempt that he thwarted, that landed him that promotion. It has some prayers. I saw this a couple of places, that there are prayers by Mordecai and Esther. And then it says there are more details of her approaching the king to plead for the people's lives. It would be kind of interesting, I think, sometime to read those. I haven't ever read them. So, do I? Yes, but consider them to be maybe a historical fiction kind of thing or something, because they did not pass tests to be included, and I am never going to stand here and say, well, this is 6 chapters, because that is not the case. Anyway, Esther is done.